Welcome back, everybody. I'm Sean LaFlock. I'm here with Scott Hagnes. This is the Fitness and Wellness and Longevity Podcast. Scott, how goes it?
Good. I'm staying warm and you're staying cool. So,
Trying
usual,
to, man. I got the AC blasting in here in February. This usually doesn't happen. I'm usually saving my electric bill at this point.
Yeah. So.
Burr, huh?
Yeah.
What's the weather like there? I know you said last time that you were about to get some flurries.
Snow on and off. Yeah, it didn't end up being quite as significant as they thought. Didn't really stick too much. So I'm thankful for that. But it does look like, as far out as you can believe, a 2-week extended forecast. It looks like it's going to mix in on and off through that whole time, all the way out to like the 20-something of February. So,
ooh, baby.
Yeah.
Yikes. So,
yeah.
Well, you know what? There could be worse things. There could be a landslide or something.
Oh, yeah. All kinds of, yeah. It's all good.
So today I had an experience, and I think we have to go back to go forward. So I was listening to a fascinating podcast with Russell Brand the other day, and he had a very unique person on. I'll find the name in just a second, but the reason why he is unique is because he is a world-class long-distance rower. He at one time held the world record in the marathon row, the 24-hour row. I think he was like a British champion, or not British champion, a British record holder. And this is all on the erg, the rowing erg. And his name is John McAvoy. Yes, I remember his name, John McAvoy. Now, the interesting thing about this guy is that he did all of this while in prison.
Oh, well.
So when he was 18, he got pigged for a burglary, and he ended up going to prison. And he has this whole story of like a rough childhood, and he's in and out of prison. And then eventually, when he's like 26 years old, he finds in the guts of the prison in the fitness area a rowing machine. And at this point, this is probably like in the early 2000s that this happens. So this isn't like, 40 years
probably
ago.
Like a Model B or something,
I was going to say, but it's legit. So
yeah, it's an actual.
He just jumps on this rower, and he goes, when I got on this rowing machine, and he had been doing, like, he had never done physical activity before, but like 2 years prior, he was in solitary. So he just started doing burpees and step ups to a chair and like push-ups and all calisthenics for like hours. And the reason why he did the step-ups to a chair is because the window was at the height at which when you stepped up, you got fresh air.
Oh,
so he would like crack his window open. That's all it was allowed to open. And then he would just get fresh air every time he stepped up. It's a pretty fascinating story. So he ends up getting on the rowing machine, and he, when you're in prison, obviously it's a very different experience. But it felt to him, and I'm paraphrasing him, like he was free. So while he was on that rowing machine, he didn't care. Like he just rowed and rowed and rowed and rowed. And in the beginning, he would do it, and they were only allowed 3 times a week. But what happened was he met somebody who was down there 7 times a week, and they said, hey, how come you get to come down here often? He goes, if you go to the warden, they have like a different word for it in Great Britain. If you go to them and tell them that you want to support this children's charity for your rowing, they'll let you go down there 7 days a week. So there's a children's charity. Like the more meters you row, the more money you make or earn this charity. So he signs the note, they sign off on him, and he's down there 7 days a week for about 2 hours at a time. And he's doing this and doing this and doing this. And someone walks by one day, and I think it's in the first month or something like that. They look at the number of meters he accumulated in that month, and they say this was 500,000 meters or something like that. Like that's basically the equivalent of rowing from here to the United States in a month. He's like, and he felt great about it. So he continued to do the same thing over and over. It's like a million meters, like in a month, like this kind of thing. So one day, a corrections officer walks by, and just as he finished a workout, he looked down at his monitor. He goes, "You are fast." And the guy goes, "What do you mean? Like, obviously when you're isolated from the world, you have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
And really all he cared about was just smashing the rower and getting himself in his strongest physical shape possible because it was his escape. He goes, no, you're proper fast. He goes, you might be like a world record holder fast. And he goes, nah, like this is bullshit. So he says, give me a day. So this guy, his name is Darren Brown. That's his correction officer that was helping him out with this. He prints out the world records in the marathon and in the row. And he gave him the record for the marathon. He goes, this can't be right. He goes, like I wrote, 20K and I would be able to hold that for longer and I would smash this record. He goes, well, like, would you be interested in doing that? So he says, of course, that'd be really cool. And one thing that this guy was always looking for was some kind of like outlet. Like he always had crime and trying to prove something, but he always kind of wanted to be an athlete. And he never really was an athlete. He wasn't in shape whatsoever. And obviously when he went to prison, he had an opportunity. Mm-hmm. So this guy, Darren Brown, goes to the world records and he says, listen, we have an extenuating circumstance. Usually you're supposed to do it either in front of judges, like they come to your place, or you have to do it out in public, which neither of these two things would be able to be done. So they go, listen, because he has these extenuating circumstances, you have to film it. You have to film him getting on the scale because he was the 75 and under, I think, 75 kilogram and under. And so they film it and they have to have two bystanders watching it as well. So they do this whole thing. And I believe it's somewhere between, he did a marathon row. It was somewhere between 2 hours and 30 and 2 hours and 40 minutes. Marathon row. And that broke the world record by 3 minutes.
Wow.
And then he went on to do the 24-hour row, and he held that world record, and he held a few other world records, and subsequently now they're British records, not world records, but indoor rowing. The 24-hour record was beaten by a guy from Harvard by 125 meters.
Oh, geez.
Yep. So the equivalent of 2 strokes over 24 hours. Wow. And when this guy was doing it, he was doing it in the basement of a prison, and his nutrition was sugar packets in a water bottle. That was his idea of nutrition when he was doing this. Like, obviously, different, right? And, the guys at Harvard, they were doing like big fans and the whole thing, but 125 meters is what he got beat by. But regardless, he's a British record holder. He was a former world record holder, and he did it all from a prison.
Wow.
So
it's pretty amazing. Yeah, I hadn't heard that story.
It's a pretty cool story. And before we go any further, Scott, I figured I'd open this up for discussion. What are some things that come to mind as you hear this kind of story?
Well, I can imagine, sometimes it's easier to achieve something when you don't know, right? He didn't know how fast he was. He was just doing it. As opposed to having a target set and maybe, being frustrated at times, right? Clear space. And then obviously a complete lack of distractions, right? He doesn't have a job he has to worry about. He doesn't have a significant other that he has to worry about, and maintaining the house, getting the groceries, paying the bills. He just can eat and train, basically. And I'd imagine, again, it's because he wasn't really training for anything. He was just doing it. I mean, he probably, went a little by feel for that day, right? Days he was feeling good or felt like he was fast, he probably went more. And
yep.
If he had a bad day, he probably was like, whatever. Took a break, came back and hit it the next day. And
it's pretty fascinating.
Shows what you can potentially do if all distractions are really removed.
Yeah, and I think, again, going kind of a little bit more into his backstory, when he was in solitary confinement, the one thing that he appreciated so he was only supposed to be in for like 7 days. So they're using this as a tool against him. Like, we're going to take away your freedom in the prison, so you won't be able to come out of this. So after like the second time going in, they were like, all right, you're done with your 7 days. He goes, I'm not coming out. I'm not going back into Gen Pop. Because he knew, like, if it was a tool that they were using against him, he was going to take it back. So, and then the same thing with like his mindset and keeping that connection of like being a human. So he was like, I'm going to move my body physically. I'm going to read books. I'm going to listen to the radio, and I'm going to keep that connection live and well. And I'm going to get rid of all the other distractions. So kind of speaking to your point, that's exactly what he did. He literally was just eating 3 squares a day and rowing his ass off, right?
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that comes to mind as well on this is your limiting beliefs, right? Mm-hmm. So when, there's so much on the line, or when we've created these stories within our head, it becomes very, very easy for us to fall back on the story, and then usually the body kind of follows suit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah. No, that's kind of what I guess what I was getting at too. Like when you don't know, right? I mean, he didn't really have any limiting beliefs, because he had no idea what was physically possible or what people did, and it didn't sound like he had cared. It wasn't like when he first started rowing, he figured he would research,
Yeah.
It wasn't till that the officer told him.
Yeah.
So it would kind of remove some of those beliefs, or like, the self-sabotage you might get on a bad day, or, not hitting a mark that you were hoping for.
Yep. Yeah, a lot of the time, maybe your own expectations are what actually limit you. And the fact that sometimes we have such a connection and an attachment to what the expectation is if we really don't believe we deserve that, we're going to be limited in our performance as well. And that's something that we have to kind of look at ourselves in the mirror about. And I'll kind of go into a little bit about that in just a bit for my own self, but I just want to kind of throw this extra thing at you. So he gets out of prison, and as he's going on the parole board, they ask him, what do you want to do with your life? And he goes, I want to be a professional athlete. Or he goes, I want to be an athlete. And the guy looked at him in the face, and he goes, that's the most ridiculous thing in the 25 years I've ever heard as a parole officer. You're denied. Like, they thought he was like nuts. So he comes back again, and he's like, this is really what I want to do. I've raised all this money, blah, blah, blah. Like, this is the only thing that's given me purpose in my life. So it turns out he ends up doing, after doing some rowing and stuff like that, he does Ironman, and he's world class at being Ironman. Amateur, but world class. Mm-hmm. So he tells of a story when he and a guy from, I believe it was Sweden, were running together in Germany during a race. And the guy, John, he's running along, and he's got his Garmin watch on, and to kind of keep his pace, and he knows what he'd be able to do. And by the way, he's run the marathon in sub 3 hours in the Ironman, which is elite. That's like top 100 in the world.
Really? Yeah.
You know what I mean? Regardless of professional or amateur. So super, super talented.
Yeah.
So he's running along the Swede, and his watch had broke, the other guy's. And as they're running along, he goes, where are we at? And he goes, oh, we're going sub 3 right now, sub 3 pace. This guy, John, to this guy. He doesn't really speak the same language, but he knew enough. And the guy ran for about another 2 seconds, and he started walking. Because he as soon as he found out in his mind that he was going faster than he ever had before, he was like, I can't handle it. I won't be able to sustain this. So he stopped.
Wow.
And he told of that story because he was like, that is such a indicator of our own limitations and beliefs. And that as soon as just nothing changed but the information in his head. And it melted him.
He was going along fine. And then,
yep.
Yeah.
And it melted him. Wow. Because what it did was to do that, and this is my own analysis of it, for him to actually be able to run that 3-hour pace, it would have to rewrite the story for him. And if you're in your mind, you say, there's no way I can do a 3-hour pace, your nervous system will follow suit. And what does your nervous system do? Oh, I start getting cramps. I start feeling fatigued. Oh, man, I'm bonking. I'm done. Okay, cool. Now I can walk. And you go right back into your beliefs. But every once in a while, and I've had experiences of this with myself, and I'll share this in a second, but every once in a while we have those times where we step out of our story and we shock ourselves. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, the mind is a powerful, powerful thing. I mean, I have seen it in many people many times. How many times have I had an athlete PR a lift by scrambling the plates or using mixes of kilos and pounds so they didn't know what was on the bar.
Yep.
And sometimes it's way more than, than they expected. A long held PR smashed because they didn't know what was on the bar. Or a trick that I've used a lot of times is, is if you pick whatever reps you need to do, whether it's a workout or just a training set, let's just say 10, right? If it's a challenging weight, how hard does the 9th and 10 rep end up being?
So true.
But if you play a game with yourself and tell yourself that it's a 12 rep set, or you have to do 12 reps before you can move on to the next thing, the 9 and 10 rep actually every time are easier because you still aren't to the hard ones yet. And even though you're not actually doing them, you just tricked yourself, and somehow that actually still works.
Right. It's the same idea of when you're doing let's say 100 wall balls. You just say, okay, I'm doing 10. I'm doing 10. I'm doing 10. And it gets you out of I've already done this many. You know what I mean?
Yep. You only focus on the immediate task at hand, not on the totality of the what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah. That being said, you can say that, and in the back of your mind, you really know what's going on. And in my mind, that's where the growth is. That's the shadow. That's the part of you that you actually have to bring out and say, hello, I'm here. I love you. And you're with me. Be honest with you, because I had an experience today of that. So at my gym, I have barely broken 6 minutes on a mile. I mean, we're talking like 5:58, and again, like my days of doing high performance running, maybe behind me for the most part, especially since I haven't done a triathlon in 10 years, right? Eight or 9 years. My best performance mile-wise ever, I think, is like a 5:23. Again, not fast, but very enduring. And my best workout I've ever done is something called the Miracle Mile. And I think I've mentioned this before. It's a mile run, rest 1 minute, times 6. And I did them in all sub 6.
Wow.
So that was during my prime of triathlon. So I probably could have run a marathon in under 3:30 or something like that. I mean, maybe close to 3 hours, but would have been okay. Would have been fine. I went on 2.5 to 3 hour runs in the woods, and the only thing that limited me was the fact that I ran out of water. And holding between 7 and 7:30 clips for that time. Again, different lifetime away. Yeah. So I think for the mile, there's obviously much more of a speed component and holding that threshold. But also I think there's a psychological component that says, what can I actually do? I've never done this before. I got my watch, I'm running. I know what times I need to hit. Very much I have to do this. I have to do this. I have to do this. I woke up at 2:30 in the morning this morning, smashed my head into the wall as I tripped into it on my laundry bin. Got about another hour of sleep. Woke up this morning, ate a couple packs of nuts, coached 4 hours, and then I started warming up for this run. About 20 minutes into my warm-up, I ran at 800, started doing some breathing exercises. Someone comes to the gym who's looking for, they were purchasing some stuff from the gym. So a half hour later, I'm done with that. And then I basically do a couple breaths, set up my camera, no watch, and I go. And my intention was to go under 6 minutes. So as I go, I'm feeling very good. Obviously the work that I was doing from basically the new year, maybe about a month before the new year, I was doing about 2 months of running progression, maybe 3 months, because it was before the turkey trot. So let's say November, December, January. But I quit halfway through January. Basically after that Ripped Games, which was in the second week of January, I didn't do anything. I ran once, maybe during a workout, but no intervals like it was before. And again, I wasn't training like I was trying to run a marathon. I was doing 2 workouts a week, one long, slow between 30 and 40 minutes at 10-minute paces. And then 3-minute intervals of high, low for 4 sets. Mm-hmm. So I'm feeling good. Body's feeling good. Hamstrings are getting smoked because I'm actually running properly. I got some decent positioning. And here's the cool thing. I didn't have my watch, which is why I filmed it. I got to the quarter mile mark and I just said, keep going, keep going. And I was like, well, this is where I should be. And I go, keep going. And it's not that I suppressed those thoughts. I just said, I'm going to keep going. I'm going sub 6, right? Mm-hmm. And then I get to that last little straightaway toward the turnaround, and I go, okay, I hear my breathing going. I'm like, that's good. That's good. Like, I'm working hard. It means I'm actually able to breathe. I turn around on a turn. I say, whatever I do, I'm going to turn quickly here. And I turn and I go. And now I'm with the wind. So I'm like, oh, this is even easier. And all I'm thinking the entire time is just continue to push the pace. And then the thought comes up, what if you can't hold this pace? And I let that be there. And I go, I'm going to continue to go. Like, I'm not going to fight that thought. I'm not going to suppress that thought. I'm just going to allow that to be there. But my truth is that I'm going to give this everything I have. Now we're on the last quarter mile, and someone pulls up to me and goes, hey, you're pushing hard there. And one of the guys from my gym, and I just gave him a thumbs up, and I just kept flying. So I make the final turn into the driveway, and I feel my breathing going. My hamstrings are roasted. My lower back is freaking fried because I'm just really pushing it. And down the straightaway, I come through the driveway, and I run through through that mile marker right at the 0. And I was like, oh man, that felt good. Like I'm huffing and puffing. I walked through, I grabbed my camera, and I started my camera, and then basically counted to 10 as I walked to the start line. And then obviously there's a 10-second runoff. Then when I got to the finish line, I walked back to the camera. And when I picked up the camera, it was at 6 minutes. So I knew I had broken 6 minutes by the times that I had to walk to and from.
Right.
So I grab the camera. I lie on my back for a second. I did it. And I was very fired up. And I looked through the camera, and I ran in 5:44. So I ran a 5:44 mile, no clock, no nothing. I haven't really run that much. I got about 2.5 hours of sleep. I ate 2 bags of nuts this morning. What else could you imagine? I mean, it wasn't a perfect run. My back kind of flared, was tight and sore, like going through that last half mile. My hamstrings were smoked. My form was fairly good. But the thing that I take away from this is that for us to rewrite our story, our nervous system has to be rewritten too, which means you have to step into something that you've never done before. And for me, I've always fought the thoughts or ignored the thoughts or ignored the feelings or whatever. Today, I embraced them and allowed them to be there. And I didn't do it because I wanted something. I did it because I knew it was right. I knew it was because this is who I am. And it felt really, really good. Like, it was one of the first times in a long time where I actually achieved something with not much expectation and just left it all kind of out there. And believe it or not, like, if I actually train a little bit, I could probably go faster.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. Just kind of a pure kind of a joy in that, right? You know, it's kind of remove some of the things that we put on ourselves and just do what you truly can, and then just, see where it ends up. And it was good.
Yeah. Definitely a cool experience. And hopefully that allows me to kind of share this with other people too, eventually. But, I need more hours of practice of this, but like, this is just a microcosm for other things that we do of our limiting beliefs. And again, I'm not saying that I was going for a 5-minute mile, you know what I mean? And I could have done a 5-minute mile, though I have no idea. But I'm basing upon a knowing inside of me. It's like, I know I can do this. Like, if I do it right, I know I can do this. Have I done it before? No. But I still know that I can do this. And a lot of the times when I tried to, I think my limiting belief flared up my back. Maybe bonk, like maybe get too anxious, maybe too get excited, and that might have slowed me down in itself. So I don't know about those other times, but I just know about this time.
Yeah, it's any little level of doubt or we can also, with the right motivation, really increase our chances. Yeah, that's one thing I really noticed through this week. So just super briefly, I started working with a coach for my riding.
Yes.
We distilled down 5 skills. I'm supposed to take 20 tries each time I ride, and I'm supposed to score misses and makes. You get a percentage, and if I don't make the 20th try, unless you're completely crushed for time, he wants you to continue off the clock until you land your last try. So it's you end on a successful note, with each skill. And what's interesting is I can see that my pull rate on the 20th try goes up significantly. I don't make them all, but if I don't make them, then the 21st try I nearly always make. So it's funny is that's clearly a mind game as well, because there's where they're just wanting to end on that successful note or not end up having to rattle off a bunch of extra tries. Somehow my nervous system is able to corral my skill a little bit better. So maybe that means I need to focus more on the other pieces, or I don't know. But I've always known that there's certain times, your chances of doing stuff go up drastically with the right internal motivation,
Yeah, it's so true. And again, like actually questioning those limiting beliefs, not in a way, and I've always questioned my beliefs in an egoic way because I always wanted to get something. But like the way I see it now is you question those beliefs so that you actually become more you, right? And you deserve that. And that's something that I haven't done as much of because you don't know what you're worth, and you have to actually explore what you're worth. You have to explore what you want in life and then see what comes up. And sometimes there's huge limiting beliefs that say you don't deserve that. There's no way I can do that. And for me, it's not disproving those. It's allowing those to be there and then taking the steps necessary for your nervous system to catch up. It's like, oh yeah, we've never done that before, but we're going to start doing this now. And we're going to show our nervous system that this is the new normal.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So it's making the new normal, so to speak.
Yeah. Lots of one thing I've kind of played with in that approach is, as I approach a skill that I'm working on and only semi-successful at it. So, well, how would I feel if I had this down?
Yeah.
And what would I do different? And comparing it, there's a certain ease about rolling up, knowing you can do something. And it's difficult to reframe your mindset and kind of trick yourself. I have found some success in that. Pretend like I actually can already do this as I attempt to do it. And
that's awesome.
Actually, it actually does work. Because part of it is it's a limiting belief, right? I know I haven't learned it yet, so I'm going to act accordingly, which means my chance of messing up when I really didn't have any reason to goes up as well. We have the self-fulfilling prophecy a little bit. And of course, over time, we get better anyway, but certainly speeding the process by not just getting in your own way.
So true, Scott. So true. And I think that's a great place to stop for today. What do you think?
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, this is the Fitness, Wellness, and Longevity podcast with Scott Hagnes and Sean LaFlock. If you like this podcast, please get online, subscribe, rate, and review. We'd love to grow this podcast, so anything helps from you guys. But Scott, how can we get a hold of you?
I'm Scott at CrossFitPortland.com.
I'm Sean at CrossFitDartBeach.com. Scotty, have a great week, man. Stay warm.
Yeah, you too. Stay cool.
Thanks, Scott. Take care, buddy.
All right, take care.
All right, bye.